So how are we going to reflect away these extra 3 watts per square metre? Well, the simplest solution, though probably not the best, is just to change the reflectivity of the Earth's surface. This is called the albedo. It's a common term used in astronomy. Albedo means how much of the light that comes in is reflected. Here's a graph of the world's albedo in February, and you can see that Antarctica is pretty reflective because it's covered in snow. So are some of these far northern regions, also covered in snow. But the tropical oceans are not so reflective. There's a reflective band along the equator because it's very cloudy there. And then some of the desert belts, and especially the oceans where it's clear, the radiation just sinks in. But generally speaking, some of these regions, only about 15% of the light is being reflected. Most of it is being absorbed, whereas on some of the ice caps up to 90% is being reflected. The average for the Earth as a whole is that 31% of the light is reflected off, and the other 69% is absorbed. So could we change this by 1%? Could we make the Earth a bit more reflective? Well, one way that's often advanced of doing this is to make cities more reflective. Cities actually only cover 0.3% of the world, so even if you make them 100% reflective, it's not going to solve the problem, but it might make a bit of a difference. And a lot of cities are made with dark coloured roofs. This is a problem in Australia in the last few years. These dark coloured roofs are thought to be very cool looking, funky, and so people have them, even though it means that they will absorb lots of sunlight on hot summer's days and make the house inside very, very hot. So couldn't we just paint all the roofs white, or put pale tiles on, make the roads white and so on? Well, there's one problem, which is that a white roof tile, yes, it doesn't absorb as much sunlight, but it also radiates less sunlight at night, so it doesn't cool down as much. So it's not as obvious as blocking the light coming in, because most tiles that block the light coming in also block the light going out, and so they might not affect the overall balance, just the day-night cycle. There are actually, however, special materials being invented which are designed to reflect visible light but emit infrared light. And some of these are quite amazing materials where they, even on a hot summer's day, they will remain cool in full sunlight. Can this really solve the problem of global warming? Well, probably not. Because the cities just cover too little of the world, and most of that is not the roofs, and the special materials you need are at the moment a bit too expensive. It could be a very good idea for our cities, however. There's an urban heat island effect where cities on hot summer's days get much hotter than the countryside around them because of all these roofs and roads absorbing the heat and not many trees and plants to cool things down. And so it might still be a very good idea not to have black roofs in hot countries like Australia, but it's probably not going to solve global warming. To do that, we're going to have to change the countryside and make that reflect more light. Now, some bits of the countryside, like deserts, actually do reflect quite a bit. They're quite light. This is part of Mungo National Park out in western New South Wales. Whereas other parts, particularly those covered in trees, absorb more of the sunlight. And this is actually a bit of a problem, because planting trees, so turning this into this, is one of the most popular ways to deal with global warming. The idea is that when trees are growing, they take up carbon dioxide and sequester it, store it in the wood. That is absolutely true. A growing tree can take a large amount of carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and store it. So if you plant trees in areas which do not have them at the moment, like this open paddock in South Australia, if you covered it with trees like this, that would be a lot of carbon locked up that's no longer in the atmosphere. And there are many countries which have plans to plant millions or billions of trees often on dry land, specifically to meet their carbon dioxide goals. But there's a problem. You just look at this image, you can see that the ground is very light, whereas the trees are very dark, so more sunlight is going to be absorbed by the trees as opposed to the grass. So yes, the trees are getting rid of carbon dioxide, but they're also absorbing more sunlight, which makes the world hotter. This is a problem with a narrow definition. Our real goal is to avoid global warming. So you might have a sub-goal of let's reduce CO2, but in this case planting trees which reduces CO2 can actually increase global warming by absorbing the sunlight more. Now people have analysed this in some depth, and it turns out that so you've got two effects. One is that trees store carbon dioxide, which is good, and the other one is they absorb more sunlight, which is bad. Which is most important? Well, it turns out that in wet tropical regions, like a rainforest here, trees are a very good idea. The reason is that they suck up water from their roots and evaporate it, evapotranspiration from their leaves, and that actually creates clouds. There's now good scientific evidence that a lot of the clouds you get over rainforest areas are actually caused by water coming from the trees. And clouds are very good at scattering sunlight away. So yes, the trees themselves are very dark, but the clouds they generate are very light, and they're storing lots of carbon dioxide, and in these regions they grow fast and big. So planting a tree in a tropical area is a very good idea, and equally chopping down a tree in a tropical area is a very bad idea. So tropical regions, definitely a good idea. Polar regions, well, the North and South Pole doesn't have trees, but the regions of the great pine forests just a bit further away from the poles, in these regions it turns out that the extra absorption is often compared to snow-covered ground. You get snow on the ground and trees up here. If you didn't have the trees, you'd be reflecting more of the light. And the trees up here do not grow quickly, and so in fact the heating effect of the extra absorption of light is actually much worse than the CO2 sequestration effect. So you do not want to plant huge numbers of trees in these polar regions. So planting trees, yes, it's a good idea in tropical regions. No, it's a bad idea in more polar regions. So in northern Australia, definitely plant more trees. Southern Australia, it's probably still a moderately good thing, but not very good. But if you're, say, in northern Russia or northern Canada, no, very bad idea. So changing the absorption of the earth, it's not going to solve our problems. It may make things worse. It certainly makes tree planting more complicated.